Hey guys, Isaac here with My Sushi Sensei, back for another class, the advanced class. So sit tight and let's start rolling. All right, so in the advanced class, we're going to talk about 4 different styles of sushi. First, we're going to talk about sashimi, then we're going to dive into nigiri, traditional rolls, and specialty rolls. We'll cover them all in due time, but let's go ahead and hop on into it. So, sashimi is just cuts of fresh fish, usually presented solo or over a bed of rice as chirashi, but the way that we're going to be presenting it today is as the sashimi rose. Now, I've got a fillet of Atlantic salmon here, and we're ready to rock and roll. When we're working with our salmon, we always want to make sure that we're using the right angle for when we're cutting, and that really depends on what we're trying to achieve. When we're trying to cut these big, beautiful presentation pieces, usually I shoot for about a 35 to 40 degree angle, depending on the fillet of fish. With a little bit of a taller fillet, you're going to need to create a steeper angle, and with a more shallow fillet, you'll have to follow that with a more shallow angle with your knife. But for this one, that 30 to 45 degrees is going to be beautiful. So usually I'm trying to get 3 to 4 pieces out of a single rose. So I'll just do a quick couple of cuts here. Now, remember, when we're using our knife, we want to use that good technique where you want to use the full length of the blade. That big pull cut is where we're going to get the best action from our knife, and it's going to create the biggest beautiful cuts that we want to see. Now, when you're ready, what we're going to do is we're going to lay those pieces of sashimi out. Ooh, I cut 5. We're going to lay those pieces out end over end, and you want to see about half of each piece, and then you'll lay the next one on top. What this is going to do is it's going to feather them out really beautifully when we go to actually bring our rows together. Now, we're going to start from our right side here, your right, my left, but we're going to try and roll that up as tight as we can, just bringing that over on itself, up, over, and around. Do make sure you keep your other hand there to kind of guide those petals as we're working, but check that out. That's exactly what we're looking for. Make sure that we feather this out just a little bit so we can get those big, beautiful pieces of salmon all nice and presented, but that's exactly what we're looking for. Now remember, the tighter we can get this to roll up, the more rose-like it will look, and then we want to feather it out. We don't want to roll it up very loosely at all. So we're going to set that over here on our presentation plate, and we'll work a bit more with that when we go to our final cut. Now, our next style of sushi that we're going to be working with is nigiri. Now, nigiri is a true form of sushi. Unlike sashimi, sashimi needs to have that rice to be considered sushi, so it is technically not sushi. But whenever we're working with rice, we always want to make sure that our hands are wet. That water actually creates a barrier between you and that sticky sushi starch of your rice. So making sure that your hands are damp, not very wet, but just wet enough to protect you is the best way to go. Now, I recommend dipping your fingertips into that water bowl, shaking off the excess, and wiping your hands just like so. That'll get you moving in the right direction. Now, every batch of rice is different, so we want to make sure that we're varying how much water we have on our hands. As soon as you get your hands on it, you'll figure it out really quickly. To create our nigiri, I like to start off with about a ping pong ball size pad of rice on my 3 fingers here. Now, our objective is to bring those grains of rice together without crushing them. So we want to use light, fast touches to bring those grains into our palm. Now, while we're doing this, I like to pat on both the top and the bottom of our nigiri ball, and using light, fast touches, it'll bring those grains of rice together without actually causing them to fuse. We don't want to make them fuse, because if they are, you're going to end up with something that's very chewy and very starchy, and what we're looking for is light, fluffy, delicious sushi. Now we're going to continue that same cut for our topper for this nigiri. And when you're ready, you'll just lay your fish right over the top like so. Now, our objective, again, is to get that fish to stick to the rice so that we can go to eat it later on. But what we don't want to do is to press straight down. So what I recommend is bringing your fingers around the side, right, like this. That'll give you that nice even pressure all the way around, and it'll help your fish stick to your rice so that when we go to eat it, we can dip our fish into soy sauce rather than our rice. So we do the flip and check. It looking like it's holding to me, so we're gonna set that over here on the side for a little bit later. Now we're gonna create one more type of nigiri, still salmon, but we're going to make a more traditional nigiri. Now traditionally, nigiri has wasabi on the underside of the fish. Wasabi is intended to flavor and enhance the fish, not dominate it. So we just wanna use a little bit, but what it does is it gives us that great wasabi flavor without the overwhelming wasabi burn, because when you're working with wasabi, as you're eating it, it goes aerosol in your mouth and gets up into your nasal passages, which is what causes that big burn. So what we want to do is we want to put it on the underside of the fish, which helps knock that burn down and gives us that great flavor that we love without the overwhelming burn. So we'll take our cut of fish, and then we're going to take just a little bit of wasabi here on our finger, and we're going to spread it along the length of our fish. Now, if you don't like wasabi, that's about as much wasabi as you'll want. If you do like wasabi, that's about as much wasabi as you'll want. Again, it's intended to flavor and enhance our fish, not dominate it. So if you love wasabi, by all means, knock yourself out. But for us that are trying to experience this sushi, we do want to make sure that we're being a little more conservative with our wasabi. Now we're going to take that wasabi side down, and again, we're going to bring our fingers around the side and get that nice hold, so we get that nice, big, beautiful presentation and a great hold on our rice. Now, if you feel so inclined, I highly, highly recommend adding very thin slices of lemon to the top of your salmon nigiri. It really just adds a brightness and a fantastic flavor. You gotta eat them with the rind. It's a thing, trust me. Absolutely revolutionary experience. All right, now our next style of sushi that we're gonna be creating are traditional rolls. Now, traditional rolls are more often than not what you'll find in Japan, but for that, we'll need our bamboo mat. Our bamboo mat is called a maki-su. That actually is what brings all of our rolls together. So we want to make sure our bamboo mat is as clean as possible. Make sure you clean up your station really well as well. That'll help us roll the best sushi possible. When you're ready, we're going to grab our nori. Now, these are already cut into half sheets, but if you've got full sheets of nori, just bend them right in half and pinch them along the edge. That'll get us moving in the right direction. Nori has two very distinct sides. We've got the rough side and we've got the smooth side. When you get your hands on it, you'll know immediately which is which, because one side is rough and the other side is smooth. But it's important that we put rice on the rough side so that when we go to roll our sushi, we've got that nice, shiny, beautiful side out, which will help with our presentation. Again, whenever you're handling rice, make sure you get those hands wet, and then we're gonna dive right into our rice bin. Now, I like to start off with about a tennis ball size pat of rice. It's a little bit small there. About a tennis ball on the bottom half of my nori. Now, why we do this is because we want to spread that nori up and out. Most people like to, or tend to, press their rice into their nori, but that's actually a no-no because that nori is incredibly dry. And if we're pressing that rice in, what you're gonna find is that the nori just immediately soaks up all of that water and completely gets ruined, and it, well, in my opinion, ruined, but it becomes very chewy, very stringy and gummy. We're trying to avoid that as much as possible. So again, fingers wet, wipe your hands, and then pick and spread your rice. Make sure we get it all the way to the sides, all the way down to the bottom, and 2/3 of the way up our sheet of nori. By getting complete coverage, it'll create a nice, consistent roll that we can use to bring all of those ingredients together. Now, when we're cutting our fish for traditional rolls, I don't like to use the big flat pieces. I like to cut vertically off of the end of my fillet and get those nice, big, beautiful pieces of salmon. that we're gonna use to cover our full sheet of nori. Now I'm gonna set these off to the side real quick and bring our bamboo mat back. Now you'll notice I clean everything in between every single step. And it's because making sure that you have a clean workstation will help immensely when you're rolling sushi. It only takes a single grain of rice to completely pull apart a roll, so making sure that everything's nice and clean will really help you through your process. Now we want to put our fish right down the middle of our rice. We do want to make sure that our fish goes all the way from one side of our nori to the other. We don't want to have anything, any gaps hanging out from on the edges. If you do, when we go to roll it, those end pieces are going to be very empty. So hanging out is A-OK, or hanging off the sides. Then we're going to add our ingredients. For this roll, I love to add cucumber, green onion, and avocado. It is a slam dunk of a combo. Now we're going to add our hard ingredients, cucumber, further away from us, our soft ingredients, avocado, closer towards us, and our green onions pretty much wherever we feel like. But that's actually really important because we're trying to keep those soft ingredients as far away from our sealing edge as possible. So when we're ready, we'll put our thumbs underneath our bamboo, 4 fingers on top of those hard ingredients, and we're going to bring this bamboo up, over, and around to the far side of our hard ingredients. So big up, over, and around, and then down on the far side. If you did it right, you should see a little bit of rice still on that side, which is perfect. Then we're going to give it a nice hug here. Do make sure you give it a nice hug. We're not trying to crush it again, but we are trying to make sure that all of those ingredients come together and meld really nicely. If you're squeezing it too tight, you're going to cause your avocados to jump ship. So make sure we're not squeezing it as tightly as you think. And we're going to let that bamboo fall back, and we're going to have this nice, beautiful roll. Halfway done, but almost there. Now, before we roll this one out the rest of the way by hand, we do want to make sure that we get a small pinch of rice, 2 to 3 grains will do, and we're going to smear it along our sealing edge, which is that top edge of our nori. What this does is it gives us a glue that will actually help our roll seal. Now, you'll notice as soon as I press that rice into the nori, it immediately begins to roll right up. That's because all of the water is soaking into that nori and compromising it. So we need to continue rolling through this process. Don't stop and teach a sushi class or something, or else that's gonna roll right up on you. Now, again, we wanna make sure that we're rolling this out by hand, but we wanna keep that nice down pressure on it. We wanna make sure our roll is nice and tight, and that we finish our roll and it's very taut. If you've got a loose roll, what you're gonna find is when we go to cut, it'll just press right down into your roll and it'll be much more difficult to cut. Now that we've got our roll all set, we need to pay attention to where that seam is at. That seam's the weakest part of our sushi roll, and we wanna make sure that the cutting board is there to reinforce it. So we'll put that seam side down on the cutting board, and we're gonna lay our bamboo mat right back over the top. This is our sealing and shaping hug that gives us that nice seal on the bottom of our roll. Want to make sure that that is sealed, and we want to make sure that our roll is the right shape. We want nice, tall, proud, round sushi rolls with nice flat bottoms. That's actually a structural point because round sushi tends to roll, and with that flat bottom, it'll hold in place when we go to plate it. We're going to take our bamboo mat and set it off to the side, and then we're going to dive right back into cutting our sushi. Now, however you choose to hold your knife is completely up to you. If you choose to hold your knife like this, that's fantastic. We love to see that. If you choose to hold your knife like this, that's all right too. If you choose to hold your knife like this, don't do that. It's weird. But how you choose to hold your roll, now that I'm very particular about. Rather than holding it with your fingertips out, I always recommend that you bring those fingertips in. What this is going to do is it protects your fingers and it gives them a much cleaner place to hold on to, and it helps you keep track of that dastardly thumb. Just so you know, it's always your thumb. Now, our cutting technique will always be the exact same. We're going to get that knife wet Allow a bead of water to run down the length of the blade. This serves the same purpose as getting our hands wet. We do want to make sure that we shake off as much of that water back into our water dish as possible because we don't want to add it to our sushi. Now, again, bring your fingertips in and then start at the heel of the knife and pull all the way through to the tip. Now, notice, big back and forth movement, not a whole bunch of up and down. Rock that blade when you get to the bottom and you'll be left with these big, beautiful cuts. Check that out. Notice cutting through the grains of rice rather than around them. It didn't change the shape of our sushi at all because we're using that big back and forth technique. Now, I'm cleaning my knife in between every single cut, and I highly recommend that you do as well. That'll help your cuts come out nice and clean every single time. Well, let's walk through that technique one more time. Get that knife wet, shake any excess back into the bowl, and then we're gonna go to cut. Big back and forth, not a whole bunch of up and down, then rock that blade when you get to the bottom. Now notice, you can go back and forth 3 or 4 times, which is perfect. I'm not putting any downward pressure on my roll. I'm letting the knife do the work for me. I like to tell people, we paid for the full knife, we're gonna use the full knife. Now, make sure you get that knife nice and clean, but as we get better at this, you don't have to clean in between every single cut. You'll be much better and you'll get that big 1-2 pull and your rolls will come out nice and clean every single time. Now, turning those rolls at an angle, 45 degrees is perfect. It displays out those beautiful ingredients and gives us that great look that we're looking for. There are hundreds of different ways that we can do this, but for our purposes today, this is the way that I prefer. Now, I'm gonna give us a little bit of a presentation here on our plate. Then we're gonna dive into our last style of sushi, specialty rolls. All right, now let's dive into those specialty rolls. Again, we're gonna need our bamboo mat, bars of bamboo going left to right, and we're gonna grab our sheet of nori. Now, for our sheet of nori, what we don't want to do is get it wet. Wet as in big droplets of water. Having your wet rag and wiping your bamboo mat is totally fine, but what we don't wanna do is see those big drops of water. When you're ready, you're gonna take your nori, you're gonna place it horizontally, or left to right, and then we're gonna start adding our rice. Again, get those hands wet. Hopefully you figured that out by now. And then we're going to add our rice to our nori. Now, we're gonna use a bit more rice this time because we're creating a full sheet of nori, but the technique is still the same. Pick and spread and allow those grains of rice to get all the way into the corners, all the way to the bottom, and all the way out to the sides. It's easier to add more rice, but it's difficult to, to take rice away. So once we get started, make sure you add just a little bit of rice to begin with, and then go from there. I find that about a baseball is where a baseball size pad of rice is about what you need. But for everybody, it's a little bit different because of how much rice you prefer on your pad. Now, once we've got all of our rice in place, I like to give it a light little pat here. That'll help those rice grains stick to themselves and not to anything else. Then we're going to grip it, rip it, and flip it. There's no really any gripping, and flipping. It's just kind of flopping it over, but it rolls off the tongue so well, gotta say it. Now we're gonna pinch at the top corners here, and then we're just gonna flop it right over. Now, most people are really concerned that they're gonna break it, they're gonna damage their nori. It's actually extremely stable in this form. The only way that you're really gonna have a problem with it is if you start frisbeeing it around, in which case your problem's gonna be me, because your sushi's gonna turn out ugly. Now, let's slide that nori back into place. We do wanna be able to see 4 bars of bamboo down here on the bottom before we go to roll. That'll be important for when we're bringing all of those ingredients together and creating that nice roll shape. So 4 bars of bamboo visible down on the bottom, and then we're gonna add our ingredients. I'm gonna slide this off to the side real quick so I can cut more of my salmon. Big cuts are fantastic. We love to see those nice thick pieces, but now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut them in half horizontally so that we can use them to get all the way across our sheet of nori. We want to make sure that we've got a nice consistent amount of ingredients all the way across, because if we're leaving gaps or spaces, what you're going to find is that your ingredients tend to fall out when we go to cut it. Again, we're going to put our hard ingredients further away from us and our soft ingredients closer towards us. If you've got some that's hanging out the end excessively, you can pare those off, but it's a-okay to have ingredients coming out of your end. That's not a problem at all. We're gonna put some avocados down here on the bottom. They are our soft ingredients. And I'm actually gonna add lemon to this roll as well. It really makes our salmon pop, and I do love me some lemon. We're gonna slice them horizontally, again, because if you're putting those whole half moons into your sushi, what you're gonna find is that they don't like to roll very well. They tend to get halfway and then kick all of the other ingredients out. So make sure that when you're ready, you'll cut those slices of lemon in half. So you'll have these little tiny half moons, and those will go on the bottom side of our roll because lemon is a soft ingredient. Now, notice how much I've added to the inside of this roll. Not very much. And that's okay, especially when we're first getting started. I highly recommend creating more lean rolls just so we can practice the techniques and get everything to close. It's really awful to get all the way done with a specialty roll and not have it close on you, because then they tend to fall apart when we go to eat it. So make sure that we're being cautious on how much of our ingredients we're adding, but then we're gonna go to roll. Again, that rolling technique will always be the exact same. Thumbs underneath the bamboo, 4 fingers on top of those hard ingredients, and we're gonna bring it up, over and around, and then down on the far side of our ingredients. Now, you should be able to see that nice strip of green. If you can't see that strip of green, you're gonna have a little bit of a problem. You might not get that one closed. So if you find that that's the case, you can bring your bamboo back and unroll it a little bit. Then as you go around, tuck, 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 to make sure that those extra bars of bamboo touch the far side of our ingredients. Then we're gonna bring everything together with that light hug again. We're gonna let that bamboo fall back, and this is looking perfect. Now, our objective is to get our white of the rice on the outside to touch the green of the nori on the inside. That's what's actually gonna seal the roll. So, again, whenever you're touching rice, fingers need to be wet. Don't add more water to your sushi than you absolutely have to, but we do want to make sure that we're not pulling this roll apart because that rice is sticking to us. Once you've got that roll closed, you're off to the races. We're gonna, again, set this seam side down on our cutting board and give it another hug here. Sealing and shaping hug, we love to see that. And we've got our roll, which is ready to cut. But we're not quite ready yet. This is the advanced class. So we're gonna set that off to the side, and then we're gonna cut some toppers for our roll. Now, we're gonna use that big presentation cut again. I'm gonna cut 3 big pieces off of here. 1, 2, and 3. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna alternate salmon and avocado. So we're gonna take those big presentation pieces, we're gonna lay them diagonally. Then we're gonna grab 2 thin slices of avocado. Just gonna kind of shape them around our roll. We're gonna lay that next slice of salmon on, then 2 more avocados. And then finally, that final slice of salmon. Check that out. It's looking good, gonna be delicious and nutritious. Try and set them out as evenly as you can. And then we're gonna go to finalize this roll. Now, a secret is when you're topping your rolls is using a bit of saran wrap as a binder to actually hold all of those ingredients on there. If you're trying to cut it with your just straight ingredients, what you're gonna find is that that knife will catch on those avocados or that topper or whatever ingredients you have on top, and it'll pull them right off. By using the saran wrap, we can actually get a nice tight grip on it, and it'll allow us to cut through the saran wrap. Now, for those of you who've ever worked with saran wrap, you know that nothing sticks to saran wrap like saran wrap. So if you have a bare pad, you can use that, or you can take the saran wrap off of the pad we just got done using. Both work, but we want to make sure that we're giving this a nice hug. The reason that we don't use this pad is because when we're pressing these ingredients in, it tends to get really messy, especially when we're working with avocado and any other types of sauce. So we try and keep those separated as much as possible. Now, once we've got our roll pressed on there, all of those ingredients are looking nice and beautiful and holding in place, we're gonna go to cut. Now, if it was important before, it's imperative now that we're using the right technique. Again, get that knife wet, and we're gonna cut from one side to the other, but we wanna start at the heel of the knife and do that big pull cut, big back and forth, not a whole bunch of up and down. We want to move a little bit faster this time, so it gives the ingredients less time to catch on our knife. But using that big back and forth technique will give us very, very clean cuts and allow us to mow right through this roll. Big, beautiful cuts. And as you notice, I'm not cleaning my knife in between every single cut because I do this all day, every day. But especially for beginners, make sure you're cleaning in between every single cut. It'll help you out immensely. Now, this is the point where everyone always gets excited. They're like, ooh, we're done. Grip it and rip it. Not the case. We want to make sure we're lightly pulling that saran wrap off, because sometimes that saran wrap does get down in between those cuts and it'll pull your ingredients off as we go to release it. Now, make sure your hands are a little bit damp when we go to pick up our roll, because we don't want to pull those rolls apart. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to spread them out just like this. And then we'll go to plate. So I like to pick them all up and go directly over to my presentation plate. Give it a little bit of a bend just to follow our other roll, but check that out. That turned out so well. I am thrilled with how this one turned out. If you have any little pieces of extra rice, I like to pick those off just because I like to see that presentation. They say you eat sushi with your eyes first, then your mouth, and I cannot wait to dive into this one. Check that out. If you have little end rolls that don't like to hold on, you can lean them in. That also helped me when I was getting started. And right now, but spicy mayo is an excellent addition to this roll. Dots on top are super consistent and very easy. They make for a great presentation. Then if you feel so inclined, you can also add the big looping circles. This is eel sauce, a huge fan favorite, and big looping circles work really well if you can be very, very consistent with it. We do want to make sure that we're being consistent though, because if your squeeze is off or if your aim is off, what you're going to find is that it tends to go everywhere. But check that roll out. That is some fantastic sushi. This has been the advanced class. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.